Hello everyone, it's time for another episode of Across the Grid. Now, recently this channel passed 500 subscribers. Well, as of this recording, we actually passed 600 subscribers, which is pretty wild considering that my original expectation was to be crossing 500 by around the end of the year. Anyway, while it's a little bit late, I would still like to celebrate crossing the halfway mark to 1,000 subs. So to do that, I'm going to go ahead and compare the Golden Knights, Utsemimaru, or Ucci, and Ivan of Xandar. This is a comparison I've wanted to do for a while. If you're looking for an angry rant about why one of these characters is great and the other sucks, then, well, that's not what this video is going to be. I have my personal preference, but overall, I think both characters are done very well. What I find interesting about comparing Power Rangers and Super Sentai is that this is a cultural exchange between two countries that doesn't really exist anywhere else. By putting Sentai and Power Rangers side by side, you can get an insight into the worldview of two different nations. While Power Rangers is more willing to explore romantic relationships between characters and Rangers, Sentai is usually more willing to explore topics such as depression and death. While both series are aimed at a young audience, it's interesting to see the difference in what Japan and America think is appropriate for children. You also have cases like Samurai, which tries to be more of a direct adaptation of its Sentai, but instead of a cultural exchange, feels a bit more like cultural appropriation at times. And then there's Ninja Steel, which has the world's greatest ninja as a white guy who lives on a farm. Yeah. Ivan and Ucci are an example of the former. While they have similar backstories, their differences reflect the cultures they come from. At this point, I'm gonna have to bring up a small spoiler warning, not for Dino Charge, but for Kyoryuger. It's kind of impossible to talk about Ucci without bringing up some important plot points, so if you haven't seen Kyoryuger and you don't want some cool plot twists spoiled for you, you should probably just watch Kyoryuger, at least up to the point where Ucci joins the team. They're both swordsmen displaced through time by being imprisoned by one of the series' big bads. Ucci is a samurai from the Warring States period, and Ivan is a medieval knight from the fake country of Xandar, which is suspiciously similar to England. Wait a minute. Since Dino Charge is in an alternate dimension, maybe England is Xandar there. Huh. The name Xandar actually comes from Uchi's technique, which is Xandar Thunder. Since the word Xandar appears when the attack is done, the writers decided to incorporate it into Dino Charge's world and lore, which is actually pretty neat. How Ivan and Ucci end up being trapped is a bit different. In Ivan's case, he was defending himself and the prince when he accidentally bonded with the gold energem. Fury then just kind of trapped him somehow. In Kyoryuger, Chaos and Dogold killed Uchi's comrades, forcing him into a rage. His anger is what allowed Dogold to encase Uchi and imprison him. Ivan being a knight instead of a samurai is a good example of how a story element can be adapted and localized for a new audience in a way that preserves the spirit of the original while still creating something unique and worthwhile. The differences between these two characters runs a bit deeper than simply the surface change between one being a samurai and the other being a knight. Because of their differing personalities, the two interact with their teams in very different ways. When Ivan first appears, he doesn't join the Rangers because, as a knight, pledging his loyalty is very important to him. And so he starts off in a bit of an antagonistic relationship with everyone. This isn't helped when a monster makes the Dino Charge Rangers cowards, causing Ivan's disdain to grow and recruit his own ragtag team. Ivan does eventually respect the Dino Charge Rangers and joins, but even then there's a constant arrogance and pride that almost ends up costing the museum they all work at, and live at, too? Uchi starts off seeming the same. After he is freed from Dogold, he speaks down to his fellow Kyoryugers. Then the audience learns that Uchi is actually very kind-hearted and just adorkable. His kindness got his master, who physically resembles Daigo or Kyoryu Red, killed. Because of this, and having his anger used against him by Dogold, Uchi is trying to be cool and distant to better protect the people around him. Once he gets over this fear, he opens up to the Kyoryugers and is a dutiful comrade. This seems to be a bit of a jab at how 6th or extra rangers are usually introduced in Sentai. Most of the time they're these cool badasses who don't want anything to do with the weak and emotional main team. One of the reasons I love Uchi so much is that he's just a fun, lovable character who's suffered trauma and loss. Uchi's decision to join the Kyoryugers comes not from seeing that they're worthy, but from Daigo telling him that he doesn't want a subordinate. He wants a comrade. As a samurai, Uchi is used to thinking of himself as subservient to a lord. Joining the Kyoryugers as a real member involves him realizing that this team doesn't have ranks or hierarchy. Well, for the most part. Ivan's relationship to Tyler, his team's Red Ranger, is a bit different. Whereas Uchi wants to protect Daigo because of a resemblance to his former master, Ivan and Tyler are immediately rivals. The two show each other up, but in the end fight together and become really close friends. For that episode. That relationship doesn't really carry through the rest of the series, but in the context of that one episode, it's still pretty fun. Uchi adapts to modern times very quickly and has no trouble using modern technology. The man out of time aspect with him is displayed more by the way he talks with people. For example, he always addresses his teammates in a formal way with the honorific dono. Ivan, on the other hand, has a much more difficult time adapting to the modern era. I mentioned before how Ivan at first doesn't want to join the Dino Charge Rangers because he thinks they're cowards. So he goes and finds his own team, such as a cross guard, since Ivan doesn't understand how cars work, and so a man being able to stop them with a sign is impressive to him. My personal favorite is an old lady in a wheelchair who smacks the crap out of someone trying to rob her purse. This whole sequence is hilarious, and while the end result is predictable, it's still great to watch. One of the more interesting choices was that they gave Ivan a storyline that belonged to Kyoryu Gray. Kyoryu Gray is an old monk who aids the Kyoryugers as a spirit. They discover a descendant of his who turns out to be the author of a popular girls' manga. Kyoryu Gray isn't sure how to feel about this at first, but eventually warms up to his descendant and accepts his strength. In Dino Charge, Kyoryu Gray is replaced by the Graphite Ranger, who is the current Prince of Xandar. So instead, we get introduced to Ivan's descendant, Zack, who is played by the same actor. Ivan's descendant is a troubled youth who was spraying graffiti on the museum. After a talk with Riley, he mends his ways, but Ivan is unable to connect with his descendant because while he's physically young, he's mentally an old man. I like that Dino Charge was able to use Ivan's time displacement not just for comedy, but to give him some actual character development. He has to realize that even though Zack's art isn't his personal taste, that it isn't bad and he should try harder to give it a chance. If we're talking about character development and drama though, I think Kyoryuger does a better job with Uchi. In addition to Daigo's resemblance to his old master, they also give him a rivalry with Dogold. Since Dogold is living armor, he needs a host, and throughout the series tries to trick Uchi into giving into his anger again so he can possess him. At the end of the series though, they team up to defeat a common enemy and even have a final duel. And the emotional moment between the two of them at the end is just so great and genuinely earned. While I personally prefer Uchi, Ivan is still a fun character and a great example of how Sentai can be adapted into Power Rangers in an interesting way. Well, that's all for now. Special thanks to everyone who made it possible for this channel to get past not only 500 but 600 subs. It means a lot to me, actually. If people really like this video, then I'll go ahead and do another gold or silver themed Across the Grid or even Morphin Mythos video if this channel reaches 1,000 subs. Take care, everyone, and may the power protect you. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please like, comment, and subscribe. The art for this video's thumbnail was done by Blur, and the logo was done by Victory Buster. So if you like what you see on the screen right now, feel free to check both of them out at the links below. If you want to follow me on social media, I'm the most active on my Twitter account.